Now that we've created all the details we wanted to add to the outer frame, we can start building a proper mesh. So let's go ahead and maybe start down here at the bottom of the object. I'm going to switch to point mode and get my knife tool, and I'm using the knife tool in line mode, and I have restrict to selection and visible only switched off here. So let's start adding some cuts over here, and we could also connect these two areas here by adding further cuts here. And we need some geometry over here. And up here I want to make a cut up to this edge here. And for now I'm going to keep this end-gun up here. I'm not sure yet how I want to connect this to the corner section. We could also add one more cut down here, all the way to the bottom of the object. Now there's some geometry that we don't really need anymore, like these edges here, for example. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select these edges, right click and use stitch and sew to weld these edges like this. And now I'm going to use the space bar to switch back to the live selection tool. You can use the space bar to switch between the last two tools you used. So now I can select these edges here, and I can use the space bar once again to switch back to the stitch and sew tool and weld these edges like this. And now maybe let's move these points down a bit, and let's go ahead and line these points up with this point here. So I'm going to move the object axis to this point and then just scale the points down to 0 on the y-axis. And now we could start adding control edges to this hole here. So in edge mode I'm going to use the ring selection tool to select these edges here, and I'm going to use edge cut with 2 subdivisions, and I'm going to scale these edges to make these corners nice and sharp. And we need to add more edges on the inside here, like this. And we could select these polygons back there and use extrude inner to create another edge loop at the back here. Now let's hit the Q key to switch on the hypernerves, and I'm going to change the display to isoparms. And let's do a render of this region here to see how this hole looks. And you can see we have some nice definition here, and things are looking pretty good. So let's switch off the hypernerves again and start adding control edges to these extrusions here. So we could select these edges here and use edge cut once again to create control edges here to make these corners a lot sharper. Now up here this works perfectly well, but if I try to do the same thing down here, you can see we're also selecting edges where this hole is, and that's not good because we can't really add any more edges here. It would change the shape of this hole. And one thing we could do is we could try and make these control edges run around this hole to avoid this problem. In this case, however, I'm going to use a different technique. I want to terminate the edge loops instead. And by terminating the edge loops, we're going to avoid this problem here, and we're also going to avoid creating too much geometry over here. So let me just go back a few steps to undo these edges up here. And what I want to do is, in polygon mode, I'm going to select these polygons here. And I'm going to use extrude inner with preserve groups switched off. And now what we can do is select these edges over here and these ones over here. And we could add the control edges like this. Now let me switch to my front view here, and I'm going to use the path selection tool, which you can find under the select menu. And I'm going to select these edges here and dissolve them. And I'm going to select these edges over here and dissolve them as well. So now we've created the control edges at the top and at the bottom of these extrusions, and we've terminated the edge loops here. Okay, so we've avoided the problem we would otherwise had with this hole over here, and we've created fewer polygons. And now what we can do is we could line up the geometry a little better. So let me go to point mode, and I'm just going to select these points up here, and I'm going to move the object axis to this edge here and just scale these edges, these points down on the y-axis. And we can continue doing this with these points. Let's go ahead and line these ones up. So I'm going to place the object axis on this edge here. And maybe I'm just going to move this point back down a bit just to keep the geometry even. And down here I'm just going to select this point over here and these 2 points. Move the object axis to this edge and scale these points. And down here, let's see, let me grab these points here. And we're just going to do the same thing one more time. So I'm going to move the object axis to this edge here and scale these points to 0 on the y-axis. And over here, we could grab this point and line it up with this point. And maybe let's move these points down just a bit further, something like this. Now we also need control edges on the inside of these extrusions, so I'm going to use the ring selection tool once again and select all of these edges here. And let's go ahead and add some edge loops to define these corners. And next we need to add control edges on the left and on the right of these extrusions. And we can use the edges as the control edges for this extrusion up here as well. So what we could try and do is use the ring selection tool to select all of these edges here. And down here everything looks fine, but if I zoom out, you can see we've selected edges all over the place. So that's not really what I want. What I need is these edges over here. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the geometry a bit. So let's go ahead and select these edges over here, and I'm going to dissolve them. And I also want to dissolve these edges here. Now let's go to point mode and select these 2 points here. Right click and use the weld tool to weld these points to this point in the corner here. And now if I go back to edge mode and use the ring selection tool, I can select all of the edges that I want here. Okay, so let me zoom into this area again and start adding control edges like this. And once again, I would make the geometry a little more even down here. And in this case, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these 2 points and copy the size on the x-axis, and I'm just going to select these points here. And these ones down here. All the way to the bottom of the object. Now we can just override the size of these points on the x-axis by pasting the number we copied earlier. And we could do the same thing up here. So let me just grab these points and copy the size on the x-axis, and I'm just going to change the size of these 2 points like so. So let's go ahead and switch on the hyperNURBS to see how things look. So we're getting nice and even geometry. We've got a bit of distortion down here, which is due to the fact that we have a fairly large distance between these points here. And what we could do is add some more geometry down here to make the mesh look a little nicer. So let's grab the knife tool again, and I'm going to switch to loop mode, and I'm going to add a loop cut down here. And because the geometry is not closed back here, we need to move the knife tool to one of the edges at the back of the object to get a complete loop. Because if I move the loop knife to one of these edges, you can see we're only getting a partial loop. Okay, so I'm going to add a cut here, and maybe let's grab these edges or points we've just created, and I'm just going to scale these down to 0 on the y-axis, and maybe move these down a bit. Okay, so you can see this looks a lot better now. Let's go ahead and add some more control edges up here. Just going to use my ring selection tool and select all of the edges here on the inside of this extrusion, and I'm going to add some control edges here. And let's render this region here. So the edges are looking pretty nice. Of course, we need some more definition over here, and these corners are way too round, but we're going to fix that later. For now, I'm just going to leave it like that because I want to deal with this extrusion on the corner first. And what I want to do here is I want to select these polygons and create an edge loop on the inside to define the corners a little better. So let's use extrude inner with an offset of maybe 2 centimeters, which is the same distance we used on the outside. And in this case, we need to make sure we switch on preserve groups, and we also need to increase the maximum angle to 90 degrees. And you can see that didn't work down here, so let's try 91, and that fixes that problem down here. What I also want to do is I want to make the back of this extrusion round. So we need to add some geometry here. I'm going to select this edge here and use the bevel tool. And I don't want to create too much geometry, so I'm just going to use maybe one subdivision here. And we need to switch the type to linear. And make sure you have create N1 switched on here. And now we can just left click and drag in the viewport. Oh, we need to switch that to convex. Let me undo that and try again. So let's just bevel this corner here and try and get 4 somewhat even segments here. And now we can select these 2 polygons here and go to mesh n-gons, remove n-gons. And the shortcut for this would be UE. And you can also access this command by right-clicking in the viewport, but in this case, if I right-click, it's all the way at the bottom of this menu here, so you can't see it because it's outside of the recording screen. So let me just hit UE. Right, so let's see, let's switch on the hypernerves and do a render of this region down here. Now you can see the edges on this corner extrusion look pretty nice, but we don't have a lot of definition on these corners here, so we need to add more geometry down here. And we're going to have a similar problem as before when trying to use the ring selection tool to grab these edges on the corner. Because you can see, once again, we're selecting edges all over the place here. So in this case, in order to avoid this problem, I'm just going to delete these n-gons here for now. And now we can use the ring selection tool and select all of the edges up here and the ones down here. And let's add some edges here. I just want to use 2 subdivisions as before, and this time I want to move the edges fairly close to the corners. Now let's just see how that looks. So the edges are still nice and round, but there's a lot more definition. Okay, so that's looking good, I think. And now what we can do is close these holes again, but we also need to make sure that we can connect the geometry, and in order to be able to do that, we need to add more edges. So once again, I'm going to use my ring selection tool to grab these edges here and these ones up here, and I'm going to use connect to create one more edge loop right at the center of these polygons. And now we can use the bridge tool and start bridging these edges here. And we could select these edges here and use edge cut with 1 subdivision. And I'm going to slide these edges over to here maybe. And now let's use the bridge tool again to close these holes here. And as you can see, we're creating 4-sided polygons, which is good. So we're getting nice and clean geometry here. If we subdivide this, you can see things are looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and do the same thing down here. So with the bridge tool, I'm going to bridge these edges here. And now let's select these edges and use edge cut to create edges here. And let's use the bridge tool once again to close these holes here. Now we need to add further control edges because we need to define this corner down here a little better. So we need edges up here, and we also need to add control edges here. So let's grab the knife tool, and I'm still in loop mode here. And let's go ahead and add a loop cut here. And let's do the same thing up here. And if you wanted to, you could line up the geometry. So I'm just going to grab my path selection tool here and just do that again. And grab these edges here. Move the object axis and scale these edges down on the y-axis. And up here I'm going to do the same thing, so selecting these edges here, I'm going to move the object axis to this point and scale these edges down. And we could also select these edges here and do the same thing. And now we can select these edges down here and use edge cut to create another edge loop here. And because I've create angon switched off here, we're also getting this connection and removing the angon that was left here. So that's good. Okay, and once again, I'm just going to line up the geometry a little better. So let me just grab these edges here. And scale these on the z-axis. And over here, let's see, let's go to the front view. I think I need to move these edges down a bit. And we could select these edges and line them up with this point here. And over here, let's select this point and line it up with this one. And I'm going to line up this point with this one here. And we could also line up these 2 points here. And maybe move this point over a bit, like this. So let's go ahead and do a quick render here. So things are looking pretty good except for this corner. You can see this looks a little weird, and once again the reason for this is because we've got a very large distance between the top and the bottom of this extrusion here without any geometry in between. So we could make this look a little nicer by adding 2 loop cuts here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to add 1 cut down here, and I'm also going to add a cut right here. Now up here we also need control edges on the inside at the top here, and in this case we could use the edges we create here as control edges to define this corner up here a little better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these edges here and these ones down here all the way up to this edge. And now I can use edge cut with 1 subdivision, and let's slide this back and do something like this. Okay, and this creates a triangle here and a triangle up here, which is fine. We're going to fix that later. And I think that's the corner extrusion done, so let's just switch on the hyperherbs and see how things look. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. We're getting nice looking edges, and the geometry looks very clean. So let's continue and take care of these corners here, which need a lot more definition. Before I do though, we also need to have a look at this area up here, because we need to connect the geometry down to this area. And in order to be able to do that, I think we need to change the geometry down here a bit. So let me just try to explain what I want to do. So maybe I'll grab the doodle paint tool here and change the color to something like this. What I want to do is I want to change the geometry to get some edges that we can connect to this area up here. So I'm going to change the geometry by creating edges like this, and we're also going to have to create edges over here. And I'm going to do the same thing with this corner here. So we're going to have edges running like this. And also we have this triangle down here, so we need to create edges up here, and we're going to get rid of these edges here. And up here we're going to have geometry coming down like this. And what I want to do over here is, I think I'm just going to connect or weld these edges up here to this edge up here, and we also need to create more geometry over here. And over here on the left, we're going to have these edges running down here, and I'm going to just weld these edges over to this edge here. And then what we can do is connect the geometry like this. Okay, so something like this. So that's more or less what I want to do. So let's go ahead and have a look and see if this works out for us. So I'm going to select the frame again. Let's go to point mode and create some more edges. So I'm grabbing the knife tool again, and I'm switching it back to line mode here. So let's start and change the geometry down here. So we need edges here, and I want to cut all the way over to here, and we also need to create a cut here. And down here I want to make a cut all the way up to here. And let's go ahead and change the geometry of this corner here. So I'm going to make a cut here and another one over here like this. And up here what we can do is make a cut like this, and let's add a couple of cuts here. And we also need some geometry over here, so I'm going to add more cuts like this. And now let's start connecting the geometry. I'm just going to select these points here and use connect to create edges between these points here. So we're getting four-sided polygons here, which is good, and we need to remove some geometry down here, which we're going to do in a second. Now up here, like I said, I want to weld these points or edges to these ones over here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to select these edges here, right click and use stitch and sew, and weld these edges over to these ones. Now this results in a bit of a problem because we're getting this pointy polygon, and that is something you want to avoid. Now in this case we may be able to get away with it because it's a flat surface and things may not be that bad. If it doesn't work out, there's two things we can do. We can add more geometry to get rid of this pointy polygon, or we could make a compromise and just change the position of these holes, and that's probably what I want to do, because I want to avoid creating more geometry. Okay, and we're going to have the same problem over here, so for now let's just use stitch and sew to weld these edges, but we're getting the same pointy polygon over here, and we may have to fix that later. So let's have a look at the geometry down here. Now we can get rid of this edge here, so I'm just going to select it and delete it. And what we also need to do is we need to select these edges here and dissolve them. Okay, so that's looking good so far. What we could also do is move some of the points here to get a more even geometry, and in this case I'm not going to line these points up. I'm just going to switch on the hyperNURBS object and just move some of the points to get more even subdivisions here. Okay, so let's just move these points like this, and over here we can't really move this point too much because we would get a pointy polygon down here, and I don't want that, so I'm just going to move that slightly, maybe like this. Okay, and we've done something wrong because obviously we have an n-gon here, so we need to change that. Let's go ahead and use the knife tool, and I'm going to make a cut right up to here, and I'm going to cut here. So what we need to do is we need to weld these points to this point here, and we need to get rid of these edges here. So let me just select these edges here, and maybe let's do that in the perspective view, because we need to add more edges to this selection here. And I'm just going to dissolve these edges. And over here I'm going to use the path selection tool to select these edges here, and I'm going to dissolve them, and now we can weld these 2 points here, which leaves us with an n-gon down here. Now we could connect these 2 points, so this will leave us with a 4-sided polygon here and with a triangle here, and we can get rid of this triangle by selecting these edges and dissolving them. However, you can see that this results in another pointy polygon, and that's not really what I want. So I'm going to do this a little differently. Let me hit Ctrl Z to go back a step. What I want to do is use the knife tool, and I want to make a cut maybe here. And now what we can do is select this point here, and let's go ahead and line it up with this point here. And in edge mode I'm going to select these edges here and dissolve them. So we're getting 4-sided polygons, and we're avoiding this pointy polygon here. And when we subdivide this, it looks a lot better, I think. So I'm going to stick with this. Next, let's have a look at the geometry up here. I want to change that a bit as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select these points here and weld them to this point. And I also want to weld these 2 points here and these two. And now in edge mode, I'm going to select these edges here and dissolve them. So we're ending up with 4-sided polygons here, and we've got 2 n-gons here. So let's grab the knife tool and cut from this point over to this point. And what we could also do is select these 2 points here and connect them. And I also want to connect these 2 points and these 2 points. And over here we could use the knife tool and create more geometry over here. So we're getting 4-sided polygons here. And if we switch on the hypernerbs, it looks okay, it's a clean mesh, but what we could also do here is to make this look a little better, we could just dissolve these edges and connect these 2 points and these 2 points instead. Okay, so the mesh looks a little nicer like this, I think. Alright, so let me hit Q once again. Maybe let's go ahead and move these points over a bit. Okay, move these points over a bit. Something like this. To get a more even distribution of the geometry here. Okay, so let's continue adding geometry up here. What we can do is use the knife tool once again and start creating some geometry up here. So let's go ahead and do something like this. And over here, let's see. I think what I want to do is we could try and connect these 2 points and then continue doing this, but the geometry would be a bit distorted up here. So actually in this case I think I'm going to do something like this and connect these points here. And we could connect these points. So we're still having an n-gon here. So what we need to do is in edge mode, I'm going to select these edges here, and I'm going to switch on tolerance selection here. And now we can use edge cut with 2 subdivisions, and I'm just going to dissolve these edges here. And we could select these edges and use edge cut again with 2 subdivisions to create a nice flowing geometry like this. Now let's go ahead and maybe tweak some of the points here. We could use the slide tool. You can access this by right-clicking in your viewport, and let's maybe slide this point up here a bit and maybe back down a bit, and let's go ahead and slide this over a bit and down a bit, and we could grab these 2 points and move them over a bit, and also let's move these down a bit. Okay, so if we subdivide this, we're getting a nice edge flow here. And the topology looks pretty good, I think. Let's continue adding some geometry here. Now this area up here, we're not going to deal with this in this lesson. We're going to finish the area up here in the next lesson, because this is going to be a little more complicated, and we've already spent a lot of time creating the geometry down here, so I'd rather do this in a separate lesson. But at least for now, let's go ahead and add some geometry. What we could do, at least for now, is connect these 2 points and maybe connect these 2 points, and this creates this triangle here, but that's fine for now. And what I also want to do is add edges up here, and over here in the corner, what we could do is we could create an edge here between these 2 points, and we could create an edge here. And that looks okay. So if you want to, you can do it like this, or what we could also do is we could create a cut up here, one over to here, and another one like this. And doing it like this will create a couple more polygons, but the subdivision looks a little nicer. So I think I want to stick with topology like this. Okay, so now what we could also do is add control edges to these holes here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use the ring selection to select these edges here. And as before, I'm using edge cut with 2 subdivisions, and I'm going to scale these edges like this. And now we can select these edges here and add more loops like this. And let's go ahead and select the polygons at the back here. And use extrude inner to create edge loops back there. And I'm going to just continue adding control edges up here in the same way we did before. So just going to select these edges, and let me just do that again. And add control edges here. And I'm going to select these polygons here and use extrude inner to add a control edge back there. And I'm going to do the same thing up here. So let's do a quick render, and you can see things are beginning to look very nice. So we've got really nice looking edges, and the geometry is pretty clean. Of course, this area up here still looks a bit crappy, but there's a lot of work we still need to do up here. So now let's maybe take care of this extrusion here, this horizontal extrusion and the extrusion on the side here. Now, first of all, I want to use the ring selection to select these edges here and add control edges here. And we could use the ring selection again to select all of these edges and add more control edges here. And down here, I'm just going to dissolve this edge for now, which leaves us with this n-gon. And I'm going to add a loop cut down here to tighten up this corner here. And as far as this n-gon here is concerned, what we could do is we could connect these 2 points here and these points here, and we could dissolve this edge. So we're getting a 4-sided polygon here and a triangle here, and then we could use the path selection tool to select these edges here and dissolve them. But again, this would result in a polygon that is fairly pointy, and I think I don't want to do it like that. What I want to do instead is wait a little longer, and maybe we can connect this area here to the geometry up here later on. So I'm going to leave it as it is for now and deal with this n-gon sometime later. What we also need to do back here is add control edges on the inside of this extrusion here. So let's just select these polygons back here. And use extrude inner. And before I do, I want to select this tiny polygon here, and I'm just going to copy the size on the x-axis. And now let's hit Control Z to go back to the previous selection, and I'm going to use extrude inner and paste this number and use it as the offset here. And now we need to delete these polygons at the back, and what I'm going to do is just going to select all of these polygons here. And now I'm just going to deselect the big ones. So now we can delete these polygons, and we need to optimize the object. And I'm just going to select all the points at the back here, and I'm going to move these to 100 centimeters on the z-axis and line them up by changing the size to 0 on the z-axis. Okay, so let's have a look. On these corners here, we could save a couple of polygons. What we could do is just select these points here and weld them like this. We could select these points and weld them like this, and then we could just dissolve these edges here. Now we need to add more geometry to define these corners a little better, and what I want to do here is let's go to the right view, and what I'm going to do is use the knife tool, and I want to make a cut from this point here all the way to the top of the object. And let me switch on visible only now, because I also want to add a cut to here. And now we can get rid of this edge in the corner by dissolving it. And we're getting this n-gon here. And what I want to do here is grab these edges and dissolve them. And now we can select these 2 points and weld them to this point. Now let's go ahead and select these points here, and I'm going to move the object axis to this point here. Just line these points up on the y-axis like this. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. We also need to fix the corner down here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a cut here. Let's just grab all of these points here and line these up. So I'm going to place the object axis here and scale these points to 0 on the z-axis. And what we could also do is add another cut another horizontal cut, and I think I'm going to use the plane knife here with the plane set to XZ because I want to make a horizontal cut, and I'm also going to switch on snapping here to vertices. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a cut here. And now we can dissolve this edge back here. Let's switch on the hyperNURBS to see how things look. That's looking pretty good. So we're getting a bit of distortion down here. If you wanted to, you could add another loop cut down here. Okay, so let's just do another quick render. And now let's go ahead and take care of this groove up here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch the knife back to line mode, and I'm going to add 2 more cuts here. And then I'm going to select these edges, make sure I switch off tolerance selection. And in this case, I'm just going to move the modeling axis to minus 100% on the x-axis, and let's enter a size of maybe 1.5 here. Now I'm going to select these edges, move the axis to 100% on the x-axis, and change the size to 1.5. Let me just reset this. And now I'm going to select these edges here and add control edges like this. And we also need to select these edges here and these edges here, and add control edges to make these corners a little sharper. And also, because we don't have any geometry in between this edge here and this edge here, I think I'm also going to add a loop cut right here, okay, to make this edge here look a little nicer. And there's one more thing I want to do. I want to add control edges down here. So let's grab the ring selection tool and select these edges and add control edges like this. Okay, so I think this is looking pretty good. We're going to take a break now, and in the next lesson we're going to take care of this area up here.